Half an hour after I entered my daughter's home, her husband threatened to make my death look like an accident. Then, the doorbell rang. He opened the front door, wearing the same arrogant smile he had carried all evening. But the smile disappeared when he saw 6 members of his company's board, standing on the porch beside the police commissioner. My name is Margaret Montgomery. I am 71 years old, a retired prosecutor, and the mother of 1 daughter. For 30 years, I stood in courtrooms and watched dangerous men make the same mistake. They believed age meant weakness. They believed silence meant fear. And they believed a woman who stayed calm had nothing left to fight with. Garrick Ashford made all 3 mistakes in one night. It began on a cold Thursday evening outside Richmond, Virginia. I had been invited to dinner at the Ashford Mansion to celebrate Garrick's expected promotion to Chief Operating Officer of Ashford Industries. The invitation said 7 o'clock, but I arrived at 6:15. I told myself I had come early because traffic had been light. That was not true. At 4 that afternoon, Sienna had sent me a text message containing only 6 words. Mom, bring Dad's old chess clock. My late husband, Thomas, had taught Sienna to play chess when she was 7. Whenever she felt trapped by a problem, he would set the clock between them and say, "Slow your breathing. Every move creates another move." After Thomas died, the chess clock stayed in a cabinet in my study. Sienna had not mentioned it in 12 years. I knew the message was not about chess. I parked near the side entrance instead of the circular driveway. Before leaving my car, I placed a small recording watch around my wrist. I had used it during an ethics investigation 6 months earlier. It looked ordinary, but it could transmit audio to secure cloud storage. Then I sent a scheduled message to Deanna Davenport, the chair of Ashford Industries. If I do not cancel this message in 30 minutes, come to the Ashford residence with the emergency board packet. Bring Raymond Fletcher. Raymond was the city's police commissioner and an old colleague from my prosecuting days. I did not tell either of them why. I did not know yet. But I had learned long ago that, when someone you love sends a strange message, you do not wait for a second one. A housekeeper opened the side door. She looked surprised to see me. "Mrs. Montgomery," she whispered. "Dinner is not ready." "I am happy to wait." Her eyes moved toward the dining room, then back to me. "You should go in," she said. Her voice was so quiet that I almost missed the warning inside it. The dining room was bright with candles and polished silver. A fire burned in the stone fireplace. Crystal glasses shone beneath a chandelier that probably cost more than the first house Thomas and I had owned. The first thing I noticed was the sling on my daughter's arm. The second was the careful smile she wore while carrying a heavy serving dish with only one usable hand. "Mom," Sienna said, "you're early." Her voice shook. As she turned, I saw a dark mark disappear beneath the collar of her blouse. At the head of the table, Garrick Ashford sliced roast beef as if he owned not only the house, but every person inside it. He was 42, handsome in the polished way expensive magazines liked, with perfect hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. His mother, Miriam, sat beside him swirling wine in her glass. His younger brother, Curtis, leaned back in his chair and watched Sienna struggle. Garrick's sister, Elise, stared at her plate. "Use your good arm," Miriam said. "Honestly, young women today make everything dramatic." I set my handbag down. "What happened?" I asked. Sienna looked at Garrick. That one look told me more than any explanation could have. Miriam gave a cold laugh. "My son had to teach her obedience." Garrick leaned back in his chair, proud of himself. "She understands better now." The room became very quiet. Curtis smirked. Elise's face went pale. Sienna tightened her fingers around the serving spoon until her knuckles turned white. I had spent 3 decades prosecuting men who confused fear with loyalty. I knew the lowered eyes. I knew the careful silence. I knew the rehearsed explanations. Most of all, I knew anger only helped when it was controlled. I had seen Sienna frightened once before. She was 9 years old and became separated from us in a crowded train station. When she heard my voice, she ran toward me without hesitation. Now she was standing 3 feet away, and she could not meet my eyes. Whatever had happened in that house had taught my daughter to be afraid of reaching for me. So I smiled. May I sit beside Sienna? Garrick shrugged. It's your family funeral. Sienna flinched. I moved to the chair beside her and took her cold hand. Her pulse was racing. Under the table, I opened my phone and sent one message to Dr. Lillian Chen, a physician I trusted. Please stay available. Possible domestic injury. I may need you soon. Then I placed my phone face down. Garrick lifted an eyebrow. Calling a doctor because Sienna tripped. Sienna whispered. I didn't trip. Garrick's smile vanished. Miriam set down her wineglass. She fell after becoming hysterical. Miriam said. Garrick had to restrain her. A wife should not threaten her husband's career. That was the first clue. What career? I asked mildly. Garrick's smile returned. Chief Operating Officer. The promotion becomes official tomorrow. Of Ashford Industries. He laughed. You have heard of us. I looked at Sienna. Tears had filled her eyes. Yes, I said. I have. What Garrick did not know was that Ashford Industries still existed because Thomas and I had saved it from bankruptcy 22 years earlier. At the time, Garrick's father had been desperate. The company employed nearly 4,000 people, and its collapse would have destroyed families across 3 counties. Thomas believed the workers should not suffer for the mistakes of the Ashford family. We invested through the Montgomery Family Trust. In exchange, the trust received 38% of the company's voting shares and permanent authority to appoint the chair of the ethics committee. After Thomas died, I became the sole trustee. For years, I stayed out of daily operations. I attended annual meetings, reviewed major transactions, and let the professionals run the business. Garrick had met me at family holidays. He knew I had been a prosecutor. He knew I was Sienna's widowed mother. But he had never bothered to learn where the company's power truly rested. That was his 4th mistake. And before the night ended, it would cost him everything. Dinner continued, but no one was eating. Garrick mistook my silence for weakness. Sienna has been unstable for months, he said. She checks my calls. She questions my spending. She embarrasses me in front of employees. Sienna stared at him. I found invoices, she said. His jaw tightened. What invoices? I asked. She swallowed. Consulting payments. Hundreds of them. The companies do not have offices, employees, or real websites. I asked Garrick about them, and he told me to delete the files. Miriam snapped. A wife has no business digging through her husband's work. I was not digging through his work, Sienna said. He asked me to print a contract from his home computer. One of the invoices was open. Garrick reached across the table and pressed his hand against Sienna's injured shoulder. She gasped. I caught his wrist. I did not squeeze. I did not raise my voice. Remove your hand. He looked amused. Or what? Or you will make the next 30 minutes much worse for yourself. He pulled away and laughed. You retired prosecutors always think the world still listens to you. I released him. The world does not need to listen to me, Garrick. It only needs to listen to you. For a moment, his eyes narrowed. Then he smiled again. He still thought this was a family argument. He believed money could contain it, lawyers could reshape it, and his mother could explain it away. But I already knew more than he realized. For 8 months, the Ethics Committee had been reviewing suspicious vendor payments at Ashford Industries. The payments were spread across several departments. Each amount was small enough to avoid automatic review, but together they totaled more than $9 million. The invoices came from companies with ordinary names like Blue Crest Consulting, North Valley Logistics, and Meridian Strategy Group. On paper, they looked legitimate. In reality, their addresses led to empty offices, and rented mailboxes, and one abandoned repair shop. Someone inside Ashford Industries had approved the payments. We suspected Garrick, but suspicion was not proof. His electronic approvals had been routed through other managers, and every trail ended one step before reaching him. 3 weeks earlier, an anonymous envelope had arrived at my office. It contained copies of 5 invoices and a note written in block letters. Th Sajimandur Sato me. I had shown the note to Diana Davenport. We agreed not to alert Garrick until we knew what it meant. Now I understood. Sienna had found the missing link. Where are the files? I asked. Garrick slammed his palm against the table. There are no files. Sienna's eyes moved toward the center of the table. Not toward me. Toward the bread basket. It was a tiny movement. Garrick did not notice. I did. I reached for a roll, lifted the linen napkin, and felt something hard beneath it. A black flash drive was taped to the wicker. Miriam shot to her feet. Give that to me. I removed the drive and slipped it into my pocket. Garrick's expression changed. The charm disappeared. The polished executive vanished. What remained was cold calculation. You have no idea what you are touching, he said. I know exactly what I am touching. Curtis stood and moved toward the dining room door. At first, I thought he meant to leave. Instead, he locked it. The sound of the bolt sliding into place was soft, but Sienna began to shake. Miriam crossed to the kitchen counter, grabbed Sienna's phone, and dropped it into her wine glass. The screen hissed, flickered, and went black. There, Miriam said. No more recordings. Adelise whispered, Mother, stop. Miriam turned on her. You have been useless your entire life. Do not start speaking now. Adelise looked down again. Garrick stood slowly. You will give me the drive, he said. Then you will tell everyone Sienna fell down the stairs. Everyone? I asked. The hospital, her friends, anyone who asks. And if I refuse? He smiled. You are 71. Accidents happen. The room became still. I glanced at the brass clock above the fireplace. 2 minutes had passed since my scheduled message began counting down. 8 minutes remained. You targeted the wrong woman, I said. Garrick laughed. Sienna, no. Me. I removed my watch and placed it on the table. A tiny green light blinked beneath the face. Miriam went pale. Our state allows one-party consent, I said. Everything spoken since I entered this room has been transmitted to secure cloud storage. Curtis moved toward the watch. Touch it, I said, and you add destruction of evidence to whatever else is already waiting for you. He stopped. Garrick did not. He lunged across the table. I swept the watch out of reach and stood. He grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise it. Sienna screamed. Do not touch her. Garrick shoved me backward into the sideboard. Plates crashed to the floor. Pain flashed through my hip, but I stayed upright. For 1 second, everyone stared at me. Then Sienna stepped between us. Her injured arm was pressed against her body, but her good hand was raised. You hit me because I found the invoices, she said. You broke my wrist when I tried to leave. You told me no one would believe me because your family owned the police, the company, and this city. Garrick's face twisted. You ungrateful little liar. Sienna did not move. He raised his hand. I stepped beside her. Go ahead, I said. Let the recording hear the rest. His hand remained in the air. Then something unexpected happened. Elise stood. Garrick, she said, leave her alone. He turned slowly. Elise had spent the evening staring at her plate, but now she looked directly at him. You did the same thing to Claire, she said. The name changed the room. Miriam's face hardened. Claire was unstable. Elise shook her head. Claire was Garrick's college girlfriend. She disappeared from school after she accused him of hurting her. Father paid her family. Garrick pointed at his sister. Sit down. No. It was one small word, but it seemed to frighten him more than my watch. Elise looked at me. There are records in Mother's study. Settlement papers. Letters. Father kept copies. Miriam moved toward her. You will not destroy this family. Annalise's voice trembled, but she stayed standing. This family destroyed itself. The brass clock clicked forward. 29 minutes. Garrick looked from Elise to Sienna, then to me. For the first time that evening, I saw fear in his eyes. He understood that the flash drive was not his only problem anymore. The doorbell rang. Once. Twice. Garrick released a slow breath and straightened his jacket. Smile, he ordered. All of you. He unlocked the dining room and walked toward the front hall with the confidence of a man expecting harmless neighbors. I followed several steps behind him. When he opened the door, the smile collapsed from his face. Diana Davenport stood on the porch with 6 members of the board. Commissioner Raymond Fletcher stood beside her with 2 detectives. Dr. Chen held a medical bag. Behind them, the company's head of security was already recording. Diana looked past Garrick and saw the broken plates, Sienna's sling, and the bruise forming on my arm. Then she looked back at him. Good evening, Garrick, she said. We need to discuss your promotion, Garrick Ashford. Commissioner Fletcher said, Step away from the doorway. Garrick looked from Fletcher to the board. This is a family misunderstanding. Diana lifted a thick folder. No. This is an emergency governance meeting. Miriam pushed past us into the hall. You cannot enter without a warrant. One is being signed. Fletcher replied. But Mrs. Montgomery invited us, and her daughter appears to be requesting assistance. He looked at Sienna. For several seconds, she could not speak. Garrick stared at her with the same expression. He must have used every time he wanted her to doubt herself. I did not answer for her. This choice had to belong to Sienna. She took one step forward. I want them inside. That sentence broke Garrick's control. He turned toward her. After everything I gave you. Sienna lifted her chin. You gave me fear. The detectives moved between them. Dr. Chen guided Sienna into the library and examined her arm, shoulder, neck, and ribs. She spoke gently and asked permission before every touch. I watched my daughter slowly understand that she was allowed to say yes or no. In the dining room, the emergency board meeting began. It was not elegant. There were broken dishes on the floor, wine dripping from Sienna's ruined phone, and roast beef turning cold on the table. But corporate law does not require a polished conference room. It requires proper notice, enough directors for a quorum, and a record of the vote. Diana had brought all 3. The company's security director connected the flash drive to an isolated laptop. Garrick's attorney was called and placed on speakerphone. Garrick demanded that no one open the files. Diana ignored him. Folder after folder appeared on the screen. Shell companies, forged approvals, private account numbers, transfers through 3 states and 2 foreign banks. There were spreadsheets showing exactly how much money had been taken each month. There were instructions to keep individual invoices below internal review limits. There were copies of signatures belonging to managers who had never seen the documents. Then Diana opened a folder labeled Phenel EXXT. Inside was a plan to blame a junior accountant named Lina Ortiz. Lina had worked at Ashford Industries for 11 years. She was 34, recently divorced, and raising 2 children. Garrick's plan described her as financially desperate and emotionally unstable. He intended to place altered files on her computer, report an internal concern, and act shocked when investigators discovered the evidence. Sienna had found emails showing Garrick and Curtis discussing the plan. Curtis tried to leave through the kitchen. A detective stopped him before he reached the door. This is insane, Curtis said. Garrick wrote those messages. I was joking. Garrick turned on him. Shut your mouth. Diana continued opening files. The next folder was labeled Munji Omawai. That was the twist Garrick had prepared for me. Inside were forged trust documents carrying my signature. The papers claimed I had approved special vendor arrangements and personally directed payments to Blue Crest Consulting. He had planned to steal the money, frame Lena for the accounting work, and frame me for authorizing it. If the scheme had succeeded, the Montgomery Family Trust would have been forced to surrender its voting shares during the scandal. Garrick would have removed the only shareholder powerful enough to stop him. He had not only hurt my daughter because she discovered his theft. He had been preparing to destroy my husband's legacy. Garrick saw my expression and smiled again. "There she is," he said. "The real Margaret Montgomery. Not a worried mother. A shareholder protecting her money." I looked at him. "My money can be replaced." I glanced toward the library where Dr. Chen was speaking to Sienna. "My daughter cannot." Diana closed the laptop. "The board will vote on 4 emergency resolutions," she said. The first resolution suspended Garrick from all duties. The vote was unanimous. The second revoked his access to every company building, account, device, and record. Unanimous. The third authorized a full independent forensic investigation and immediate referral to state and federal authorities. Unanimous. The fourth canceled the promotion scheduled for the next morning and terminated every compensation award connected to it. Unanimous. Garrick stared at the directors as if they had betrayed him. "My name is on the building." Deanna's voice was calm. "Your grandfather's name is on the building. Your father nearly lost it. Margaret saved it. You robbed it." Miriam began to cry, but there were no tears. "Sienna provoked him," she said. "She was ruining his future." I turned toward her. "Your son ruined his future the moment he decided marriage made another human being his property." Commissioner Fletcher asked permission to play the recording from my watch. My voice came first, asking what had happened. Then Miriam's voice filled the room. My son had to teach her obedience. Garrick's threat followed. "You are 71. Accidents happen." Then came the crash of plates and Sienna's scream. No one spoke when the recording ended. Garrick looked at his mother. "Fix this." Miriam stared at him. For the first time in his life, she had no answer. The signed warrant arrived electronically 9 minutes later. Detectives searched Miriam's study and found the settlement records Elise had described. There were payments to Claire's family, letters from another former girlfriend, and a confidential agreement involving a hotel employee who had accused Curtis of assault. They also found company documents that should never have left the office. In a locked desk drawer, investigators discovered 3 passports, more than $80,000 in cash, and a list of bank accounts. Miriam had been preparing for the possibility that the scheme might collapse. She had prepared an escape for herself, not for her sons. Garrick noticed the passports on the evidence table. "You were going to leave?" he asked her. Miriam said nothing. That silence was the first punishment he received. The detectives arrested Garrick for domestic assault, unlawful restraint, witness intimidation, destruction of evidence, and financial crimes pending further investigation. Miriam was arrested for conspiracy and evidence tampering. Curtis was detained after the records tied him to 2 shell vendors. As officers led Garrick toward the front door, he twisted around to face Sienna. "You will have nothing without me." Sienna's face was wet with tears, but her voice was steady. "Watch me." Outside, blue lights flashed across the stone walls of the mansion. Neighbors stood behind curtains. Company security photographed every box of evidence. Reporters had not arrived yet, but they would. Garrick had spent years building an image of control. It disappeared in less than 1 hour. But the arrest was not the end. Powerful men rarely accept consequences quietly. By sunrise, Garrick's lawyers had already begun his revenge against us. At 6 the next morning, every major local news station received the same statement from Garrick's legal team. It described him as a respected executive caught in a private family dispute. It called Sienna emotionally troubled. It suggested I had used my corporate influence to remove a business rival. By 8, anonymous social media accounts were sharing photographs of Sienna leaving a therapist's office 2 years earlier. By 10, a financial blog published copies of the forged Montgomery Trust documents. The message was clear. Garrick intended to survive by making us look dishonest, unstable, and greedy. I had seen the strategy before. When the evidence is bad, attack the witness. When the facts are ugly, create confusion. When a woman speaks, place her entire life on trial. Sienna was staying with me under police protection. Her wrist had a small fracture. Her shoulder was badly bruised. Dr. Chen documented older injuries as well. The physical injuries would heal. The shame Garrick had trained into her would take longer. On the second morning, I found her sitting at my kitchen table staring at her phone. Hundreds of strangers had called her a liar. Some said she had married Garrick for money. Others said a real victim would have left sooner. Sienna placed the phone face down. Maybe I should disappear until this is over. I poured coffee into 2 cups. That is what he wants. I cannot fight everyone. No. But you do not have to. She looked at me. What do I have to do? Tell the truth once. Then let evidence repeat it. The independent investigation moved quickly. Lena Ortiz, the accountant Garrick planned to frame, came forward after seeing the news. She was the person who had mailed the anonymous invoices to me. For months, she had noticed approvals changing after business hours. When she raised questions, Garrick transferred her to a smaller office and removed several responsibilities. She became afraid that she was being prepared as a scapegoat. She had been right. Lena still had copies of server logs, showing Garrick's credentials accessing the altered files. A company technician found deleted messages in a backup system. Bank investigators traced money from the shell vendors into accounts controlled by Miriam Curtis and a private investment company owned by Garrick. The strongest evidence came from something Garrick had forgotten. The Ashford mansion was equipped with an expensive security system. Garrick had cameras in every hallway because he was obsessed with protecting his property. He believed the interior recordings had been erased. They had not. A cloud backup showed Sienna attempting to leave the house with a small suitcase. It showed Garrick blocking the front door. It showed him pulling the suitcase from her hand and throwing it down the stairs. The camera had no audio, but it did not need any. Another recording showed Miriam carrying Sienna's broken phone into her study and placing it beside a computer used to access the shell companies. Garrick's own system became a witness against him. 3 weeks after the arrests, Miriam's attorney asked to meet me privately. We met in a conference room at a downtown law firm. Miriam entered wearing a gray suit and no jewelry. Without the mansion, the servants, and the family table around her, she looked smaller. Her attorney placed a settlement proposal in front of me. Miriam would return some of the money and give evidence against Curtis. In exchange, the trust would support a reduced sentence. Sienna would refuse to cooperate with the domestic assault case, and the company would describe the financial crimes as unauthorized mistakes. I closed the folder. No. Miriam leaned forward. You think this is about justice, but you are enjoying it. I am enjoying watching your influence fail. That is not the same thing. You have always hated us. I barely thought about you. That answer hurt her more than anger would have. She lowered her voice. Garrick is still Sienna's husband. A public trial will humiliate her. No. It will expose him. You are destroying the Ashford name. Your family did that without my help. Miriam's face tightened. Then she offered her final threat. The mansion belongs to an Ashford holding company. Sienna will never receive $1 from it. I opened a second folder and slid it across the table. The mansion was purchased with money routed through Blue Crest Consulting. I said, it is an asset connected to the theft. Federal prosecutors filed a seizure request this morning. For the first time, Miriam lost control of her expression. That house has been in our family for generations. No. The land was. Your husband sold it 15 years ago. Garrick quietly bought it back using stolen company money. She stared at the documents. The mansion had been the symbol of their power. Garrick used it to isolate Sienna, impress investors, and remind employees that the Ashfords lived above ordinary rules. Now it was evidence. Before leaving, Miriam said, "You will regret humiliating my son." I stood. I regret that I did not see what he was doing sooner. That was the truth that kept me awake at night. I replayed every family dinner, every canceled holiday, every time Sienna said she was tired. Garrick had slowly separated her from friends, work, and confidence. He did it politely at first. He criticized her clothing as a joke. He questioned her memory. He offered to manage her money. He told her my legal career made me controlling. By the time the violence became obvious, Sienna believed asking for help would prove she had failed. I had prosecuted enough abusers to understand the pattern, but understanding a pattern in strangers is easier than seeing it inside your own family. One evening, I apologized to her. I should have known. Sienna shook her head. He made sure you would not know. I still wish I had. She reached across the table with her healing hand. Then help me make sure the next woman knows sooner. That idea became the beginning of our real revenge. While prosecutors prepared the criminal case, Sienna filed for divorce. She refused every private settlement that required silence. She asked the court to unseal the financial records connected to the mansion and the shell companies. Diana and I proposed a complete restructuring of Ashford Industries. The board removed every Ashford family member from management. New rules required independent approval for vendor payments, stronger protection for whistleblowers, and direct reporting to the Ethics Committee. Then came the vote Garrick never imagined possible. The company removed the Ashford name from its headquarters. It became Davenport Industrial Group, honoring the workers and professional managers who had kept it alive, while the Ashfords treated it like a private bank. The old brass letters were taken down on a rainy Monday morning. Sienna and I watched from across the street. She did not smile. Neither did I. Some moments are too important for celebration. They are meant for breathing. 6 months after the dinner, Garrick entered federal court wearing a dark suit and the expression of a man who still believed confidence could change reality. His lawyers had promised to challenge the flash drive, the watch recording, the company vote, and Sienna's credibility. He walked past us without looking at her. 10 minutes later, the prosecutor announced that Curtis had accepted a cooperation agreement. Garrick turned toward his brother. Curtis could not meet his eyes. Then, Miriam's attorney stood and announced that she had also agreed to provide evidence about the accounts in exchange for consideration at sentencing. Garrick's face went white. He had built his power on fear and loyalty. The moment fear changed sides, loyalty disappeared. By noon, he accepted a plea agreement. Garrick pleaded guilty to wire fraud, conspiracy, witness intimidation, obstruction, and felony domestic assault. The financial investigation traced more than $9 million through false vendors. Most of it was recovered through seized accounts, property, and insurance. At sentencing, the courtroom was full. Employees from the company sat behind Lena Ortiz. Elise sat beside Sienna. Claire, the college girlfriend Garrick had hurt years earlier, watched through a secure video connection. She had finally agreed to give a statement after learning the old settlement could no longer silence her. Garrick stood before the judge and apologized for errors in judgment. He never said Sienna's name. The judge noticed. So far, the judge told him, your statement expresses sorrow for consequences, not remorse for conduct. Garrick received 11 years in federal prison, followed by additional supervision. The state assault sentence ran partly at the same time. Miriam received 6 years. Curtis received 18 months after cooperation. As officers led Garrick away, he looked back at Sienna. The old expression returned for 1 second. It said he still believed he could reach inside her mind and make her afraid. Sienna looked at him calmly. Then she turned away first. That was the moment I knew he had truly lost. The divorce became final 2 months later. Sienna did not ask to keep the Ashford name, the cars, the jewelry, or the social position Garrick had used to control her. She asked for fair compensation, payment of her medical expenses, and the legal right to publish her own story. She received all three. Lena Ortiz was cleared of every accusation. Davenport Industrial Group promoted her to Director of Financial Controls and publicly apologized for failing to protect her. She later joined the board's ethics committee. Elise moved to another state and began rebuilding her life away from Miriam. She also helped investigators contact other women who had been pressured into silence by the Ashford family. The mansion remained in federal custody for several months. Because it had been purchased and renovated with stolen company funds, the court ordered it sold. Proceeds would repay the company and support restitution. Before the auction, I visited the property one last time. The dining room had been emptied. Pale squares marked the walls where paintings had hung. The long table was gone, but I could still remember Sienna standing beside it with her arm in a sling. I walked to the place where Garrick had threatened me. For years, that house had taught people to remain quiet. Employees lowered their voices there. Elise stared at her plate there. Sienna learned to hide pain there. I did not want another powerful family to buy it and continue the same performance behind the same stone walls. So the Montgomery Family Trust submitted a bid. We won. Sienna thought I planned to sell the land. Instead, I handed her a set of architectural drawings. The mansion would become a legal support and temporary housing center for people escaping abusive partners. The dining room would become a community kitchen. The library would hold private counseling rooms. The guest wing would become secure apartments for parents and children. Sienna stared at the drawings for a long time. You bought the house? She asked. The trust bought it. Why? Because Garrick was wrong. About what? He said the house belonged to him. I placed the keys in her hand. It never did. She began to cry. Not the silent tears she had hidden at the dinner table. These were different. They came with breath, sound, and relief. We named the center Open Door House. Sienna supervised the project with the same careful intelligence Garrick had tried to bury. She worked with lawyers, counselors, security experts, and survivors. She insisted that every bedroom have a real lock controlled by the person inside. She wanted bright windows, a children's playroom, and a kitchen that never felt formal. The old dining room changed the most. The dark wallpaper came down. The heavy curtains were removed. Sunlight entered from 3 tall windows that had been covered for years, in the exact place where Miriam once demanded obedience. We placed a long wooden table where residents could eat without asking permission. 1 year after the night of the arrests, Open Door House was ready. On opening morning, sunlight spread across the front steps. Reporters waited near the gate, but Sienna asked them to remain outside until the first families had settled in. She wore a simple blue dress. There was no sling on her arm and no bruise beneath her collar. I stood beside her holding 2 cups of coffee. Were you scared that night? She asked. Terrified. You did not look terrified. I spent 30 years practicing. She smiled. Then her expression became serious. When Garrick locked the dining room door, I thought we were trapped. So did he. What made you so certain Diana would come? I was not certain. Sienna looked surprised. I had a plan, I said. A plan is not the same as certainty. Courage usually begins before certainty arrives. She leaned her head against my shoulder, the way she had when she was a child. A car stopped at the bottom of the driveway. A young woman stepped out with a little boy and 1 suitcase. She stood near the gate, staring at the mansion. Her body was tense, as though she expected someone to tell her she did not belong there. Sienna set down her coffee. I will get her. She walked down the path and spoke quietly to the woman. The little boy held tightly to his mother's coat. Then Sienna knelt and said something that made him look toward the house. The three of them walked up the driveway together. When they reached the entrance, the woman stopped. Sienna opened the front door and held it wide. No one demanded an explanation. No one asked why she had stayed so long. No one told her to be obedient. She simply walked inside that afternoon. After the reporters left and the rooms filled with ordinary sounds, I returned to the old dining room. Children were drawing at one end of the table. Two women were speaking with an attorney at the other. In the kitchen, someone laughed. Sienna stood near the window watching them. Garrick had believed power meant controlling every door. He locked them, guarded them, and decided who was allowed to leave. In the end, he lost his company, his family name, his freedom, and the house he used as a prison. But the finest part of our revenge was not that the door closed behind him. It was that we opened it for everyone else.